Congresswoman AOC had an interesting moment recently. Let's take a look at the clip.
There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana. Because the violence and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states.
During a House hearing, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez shared her perspective on gun policy, and Congressman Clay Higgins responded with a brief but firm comment of his own, raising a broader question about how the country has changed from a time when many communities felt safe enough to leave their homes unlocked. Today, we're breaking it all down not to take sides, but to focus on clear, practical discussion. So if you value thinking for yourself, hit that subscribe button and let's dive in.
Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? A country where homes were built in cities with no locks.
Her point here is that the idea of an iron pipeline suggests legally purchased firearms from states with less restrictive laws can end up being trafficked into cities such as New York, framing the issue as one of supply chains and interstate regulation, while also pointing to Chicago and nearby Indiana when discussing how weapons move across state lines. Her argument emphasizes regulatory gaps between states, while others note that any discussion of trafficking must also consider the criminal intent behind illegal use.
Let's talk facts here. There was a lot of discussion about New York City. There is no discussion about gun violence in New York City without discussing the iron pipeline that is Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and honorary mention to Ohio, where 70% of likely illegal trafficked guns found in New York City come from.
It may come off as somewhat inconsistent to some viewers that concerns are being raised about how other countries view the United States, given recent leadership challenges across different administrations. And the situation in Chicago is often cited in these discussions as a city with some of the nation's strictest gun laws, where nearly half of the firearms used in crimes originate from outside the state. Too many. This suggests that individuals intent on committing crimes often find ways around regulations. A pattern also seen in countries like Canada and several in Europe where strict laws exist but criminal activity still adapts. And from there she continued by emphasizing what she described as the core issue.
There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana. Because the violence and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states. I move on. Every week in recent memory, we have had at least one mass shooting. This is not normal. Not only is it not normal, it is internationally embarrassing and delegitimizing to the United States.
AOC argues that there is a connection between the financial strength of the arms industry and national fatality rates, shifting the focus from firearms themselves to the funding behind the broader political debate. She highlights what she views as significant corporate lobbying and spending that, in her perspective, influence the direction of safety legislation. And after presenting this financial angle, she moves on to what she describes as the deeper root causes of the issue, redirecting the discussion towards systemic factors she believes deserve more attention.
Now let's talk about why. Let's talk about one thing more important to lobbyists and the gun industry than children, than houses of faith, than human beings. Let's talk about profit. In 2020, again, more than 45,000 Americans died by gunfire, reflecting an almost threefold increase from 2015. Are those statistics correct?
That's accurate.
So in your view, are you seeing a correlation between gun profits and gun deaths in the United States?
Yes.
Bringing identity politics into the gun discussion can make it harder to focus on the underlying facts. And it's also important to remember that correlation doesn't automatically mean causation. Citing numbers without context can lead to confusion. Since in 2023, there were nearly 47,000 deaths from gun-related injuries. While motor vehicle accidents caused over 43,000 deaths and accidental falls accounted for almost 47,000, yet society doesn't respond by banning cars or preventing people from using stairs. Instead, the point is that statistics need thoughtful context and balanced discussion to be useful. And Congressman Clay Higgins offered his own perspective to help refocus the conversation. So let us take a look at what he had to say.
For context, the NRA spent about $250 million in 2020 alone. That's more than twice the entire salary of Congress combined. In 1 year, lobbying against gun safety laws. There's also this discussion about anything but a gun, but that these are about violent people, but yet we aren't doing anything about addressing the actual root causes of misogyny, where 2/3 of mass are connected to domestic violence, or the emergence of white supremacy radicalization, mass incarceration, and poverty, and the connections between that and mass in our communities. I yield my time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
This is a difficult conversation for many people, and there are several factors often discussed, including changes in family structures over time, as two-parent households were once more common than they are today. Another issue is how such incidents are classified, since many organizations now define a mass shooting as any event in which multiple individuals are targeted with gunfire, whereas past federal definitions focused on incidents resulting in 4 or more fatalities. And these differing criteria can affect how trends are interpreted. Researchers have also noted that the pursuit of notoriety can play a role in some of these attacks, a pattern documented in various sociological studies. Congressman Clay Higgins highlighted this point with a personal story from his own experience, offering observations he felt were important to the broader discussion.
I'm going to bring us back in time to World War II. America's population, 140 million. 15 million American men came home from World War II. And there was weapons everywhere. We'll talk about mental challenge. My father was one of those men who was a Navy pilot in World War II. He came back from the war and built his family. I'm the 7th of his 8 children. We had guns everywhere. There was virtually no regulation. Any child in the 50s could buy a weapon from any seller if Daddy sent them with the money. We didn't have mass shootings. It wasn't until 1968 in America that serial numbers were even required on weapons sold in this country. You order weapons through the Sears catalog by the mail.
Ultimately, the conversation often comes down to the distinction between an object and the intent behind its use. And while many people believe that thoughtful regulations can help reduce harm, others emphasize that any policy discussions should remain consistent with constitutional protections, particularly the Second Amendment, to avoid concerns about government overreach or limitations on individual rights. It's a complex issue with many perspectives, so feel free to share your